Why did it go so wrong for Lukaku, in your opinion, Robbo?
I don't think they played to his strengths to start with, because when he was at Manchester United, anyone in England talks about him being a goal scorer. When crosses come into the box, he get on the end of things. When he played for Inter Milan, and particularly Antonio Conte, he was the focal point of every attack. They might have played round the back, but they were always looking to get it into his feet and get him and Martinez working together. He must have had more touches than any other player in the team at times. When he was at Chelsea, he had hardly any touches. They were building up slowly, they were going down the wide areas, and then his movement in the box wasn't quite good enough. He then lost confidence, he then lost fitness. So some of it was his own fault, but I don't think Thomas Tuchel got the best out of him with the tactics they used. And if he does go back to Inter, where he's not going to be popular when he first goes back because of certain reasons, he's going to have to start playing the way he did when he was there before. Good with his back to goal, make runs down the side of defenders, be powerful when the ball comes in the box. He's got to be the all-round centre-forward. He was for 2 seasons at Inter Milan. He was poor last season for Chelsea.
I know that focal point when he was at Inter, but that doesn't excuse some of those performances. And you know, I've been in his camp of trying to give him time for quite a while.
Yes.
At the end, I mean, you can't forgive, for example, that Crystal Palace game when he was ridiculed for having 1 touch from the kick-off, I think 1 other, and a couple in the second half. That's not a football team style. That's a player that's not putting himself in the correct position to be able to interchange with his team. That's a player that's almost hiding behind other players because, as Robbo said, he's lost his confidence. The crowd were getting on his back. The fans were not particularly amused at his rhetoric and his attitude. And whilst, as you know, I don't think, in my opinion, Chelsea handled it particularly well, he handled it horribly because he piled the pressure on himself and then he couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
I get it that Chelsea are a little bit pedestrian, or at times pedestrian with their passing, but come on, in the last 3 months of the season when he wasn't a regular, I'll give you that, half the time you couldn't find him. That's not down to Thomas Tuchel, that's down to the player.
Robbo, Stevie Nicol obviously has been highly critical of Lukaku over the years, and he is in somewhat in I told you so mode, that when he's up against weaker opposition, defenders who aren't as good, he can bully them, he can take advantage of that, but when he's up against a proper, organised defence, he doesn't have that quality that you need at the Premier League level, at the top level, to break down these sides. Yeah,
to a certain degree, I would say that I agree with Stevie. There's been times when he first went to Inter, the first 5-6 games, the players kept on looking at him and saying, we want to pass the ball into you then, you've made the wrong run. We wanted to hit it over the top and you've made the wrong run. And Antonio Conte got to him and must have worked with him week in, week out, day in, day out, and made him a far better player. Now, I still don't think when he's left to his own devices, he's got the game understanding that some other players have got. But when he's in a formulated pattern of play, which Antonio Conte had at Inter, he was outstanding along with Martinez. Is he going to get that if he goes back to Inter with Simeone Inzaghi? I'm not so sure. The ideal move for him would have been one to Tottenham, but obviously with Harry Kane, that's not going to be the case.
Jules, obviously you look at this and you kind of think no matter what he goes back to Inter and achieves in this second stint, always his performances for Manchester United and Chelsea will be held against him when you look back at his legacy at domestic level.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he, in a way, the 2 years at Milan, especially the second one, was, which is what he wanted. He wanted to show people he had a point to prove. He said that many times, and in a way, that kind of corrected a bit what a lot of people thought of his time in England. And he was like saying, you see, I can do this. I can be one of the top strikers in Europe. And now this season at Chelsea has just brought all the past back, and then we've forgotten a bit how good he was for Inter. And I think this is it. He will go back because that transfer will happen, and he will have almost to go back from the beginning, from scratch, to show again, to prove a point, and say, you know what, that season at Chelsea was just an accident. There's the curse of the number 9, there's Tuchel, his communication, anything. There's a lot of reasons why it didn't happen. His responsibility, of course, as well, a lot of it. But then he will have to try to have another good season minimum to say, you know what, that was just an accident. It was a freak season for many reasons, but look how good I can still be, which, again, is going to probably be even harder than the first spell in Inter.
I think he could have posted some good numbers.
I think everybody did, didn't they?
I do,
When he
but
arrived?
I think it's down to him. I mean, I can't remember what the graphic. Yeah, I can't remember what the graphic said. Was it 15? Right.
Yeah.
15 goals.
Yeah, 15.
Right, okay, and you might argue where were the goals scored? What opposition were they against? Blah blah blah. All right, forget that for the time being. All I'm saying is he's posted 15 with his head buried in the sand. Right, basically for, apart from the first 2 or 3 months of the season, he then had injuries, he had COVID, he had that ridiculous interview, he got dropped, he lost his confidence, he didn't want to be there, and still managed to get 15 goals.
Yeah.
If he had his head right from the start, and not everybody agrees with tactics, and not everybody agrees with the way the manager plays, and sometimes you've got to put up with that, but if he'd had his head right, got around all that, forgot about Inter Milan, forgot about these interviews suggesting about going back to Italy, piling the pressure on himself, he could easily have got well into the 20s. Yeah. Easily. And then nobody would have said, had he not given the interview and he'd scored 25 goals, oh, this is a disaster. But he's brought it on himself. He's managed to get 15 goals playing with his head really where it shouldn't be. So it's basically just down to him, nobody else.
But what's interesting when you take a look at the history of big signings that Chelsea have made, we've kind of trying to put in inflation in this statistic as well, is that they have made so many bad decisions over the years and wasted a lot of money in doing so.
Well, Fernando Torres was as you know, at one point was arguably the best striker on the planet, but he was over the hill when he arrived, and
completely.
He wasn't. I believe it was Ancelotti at the time, and Ancelotti, I believe, did not want him. It was above his head, let's get him in. So there's not all been management decisions, it's been above their heads, but yeah, there's some good players in there. You could throw in, I don't know what he calls, but Shevchenko.
Yeah, of course, Shevchenko could be in
the end
there
of his
as well.
career.
He was 31 million at the time when he made that move.
Who's the anti-American?
Well, it's interesting because you could say, Christian Pulisic, 70 million, but he hasn't failed.
Hey, Havertz hasn't. He just hasn't.
But I think the thing is, it's a lot of money for Pulisic, who isn't guaranteed a starting place. Kepa is sat on the bench. Lukaku wasn't starting
Kepa was a
yet.
disaster. I mean, he's been a good backup, but you don't want a backup at 75 million.
Yeah.
But his general, when he was the number one, he was not good. I mean, the players lost confidence in him. The crowd lost confidence in him. We saw games where, when he wasn't having a good game, the players almost, talking to each other about him, and it was just horrible. Whether he goes away and resurrects his career as a number one again, which I think he needs to do, he probably will, and he needs to do it fast. But the other ones are kind of squad players, aren't they? And I mean, that's where we are these days. It's a bit like saying, you get people like Diego Jota and one or two others at Liverpool and some at Man City. Jack Grealish, 100 million. Is he going to play every week? No, he's not. He's not Kevin De Bruyne, is he? He's not going to play every week. So they've not been brilliant, these players, but I suppose
the thing is,
it's the nature of the rotation of the game these days.
But for Jack Grealish, City are trending in very much the right direction, aren't they?
I mean, if we're looking at disasters, people will say Fernando Torres scored, what was it, in the Champions League?
Yeah, against Barcelona.
But as a general rule of thumb, I used to go down to Stamford Bridge back when we were covering games there, and the fans around us, the fans around where we were broadcasting from, were chuckling at themselves. He'd be falling over the ball and just doing stuff I never saw him do at Liverpool. He clearly had lost a couple of yards in pace. He'd had a bad injury with his thigh previous to that, and he'd lost his confidence. He just was never the same player that first arrived in England from Atletico Madrid.
It's a lot of money, Jules, they've spent.
A lot of money. Torres, of course, and Craig is right. Carlo Ancelotti didn't even know that they were signing him until he was told on the last night of that January transfer window. The others, so you can sign players who are expensive, but if you look even at the most expensive players in the rest of Europe, not just at Chelsea, the one especially above the 100 million euros mark, not many of them have been a success. So there's clearly an issue there with how heavy the price tag is, maybe the pressure, maybe some are just not good enough and you overpaid, because sometimes that happens. It happens a lot at Chelsea, yes, but it happens with all the big clubs. And this is quite fascinating, really. But for Chelsea, there's been issues, and we said a lot of the number nines have struggled at that club as well before Lukaku.
Just quickly, I know there's an age and contract thing, but just to put it in perspective, Bayern Munich have just signed a guy who would roast almost all of those players, certainly the ones in his position, you know, Pulisic, Havertz, these kind. Sadio Mane, at half the price of that? I know he's an older player, but not that old. And Bayern Munich have got him. Liverpool got him for a good fee, sold him for a good fee, and got 5 good years out of him of what it was for half the price of a Pulisic and a Havertz and others. That's proper business.
Yeah.
Chelsea just look as if they've been throwing it around.
What do you think, Robbo?
Dollars.
Well, the problem is that's when you have a director of football, you have somebody going and making the signings that don't always consult with the manager because they don't always work together. The manager needs to have a system of play where the players fit into that system. And sometimes if a director of football or a chief executive goes and buys players that they don't fancy, you're always going to have problems. And it happens time and time again. Until they give the managers more power to buy the players, you're going to have problems like this.
It's an interim sporting director. I keep interrupting you today.
Yeah,
I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just you're very fast to get away.
Well, I'm not getting away.
Interim sporting director at Chelsea is the new owner.
There you go.
Todd Bowley.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.